The CNBC TV 18 special, I'm Shereen. Bhan. 2015 is drawing to a close, and as we approach the new year, it is time for us to engage with top ministers in the government to understand what the priorities will be in the new year and to assess the performance in the year gone by. Joining me today is the Commerce Minister, Nirmala Sitharaman. Ms. Sitharaman, appreciate you joining us on CNBC TV 18. Let me start by asking you for your own assessment of the year gone by. It's been a mixed year as far as the Indian economy is concerned. We have had to rescale our aspirations and our expectations for growth. The initial expectation was that we'd be able to do 8% plus. That has not been the case. There are domestic factors at play, there are global factors at play as well. But if I were to ask you in the context of your own portfolio in your own ministry, what would you qualify as the high points and the disappointments?
The obvious is exports, where for the last 10 to 11 months, exports are falling. We have gone into great detail as to what is causing it and what kind of a fall is it. The quantum of export is not falling. The value is getting affected. We all know the reasons by now because this has been discussed quite a few times. And this in a year when a fresh new policy, foreign trade policy, was announced from 1st of April, and in which we had really refocused on areas where our traditional exports had happened, identified newer areas, gave different kind of incentive packages. The incentives were announced much later than the policy itself. So for me, it's a year in which a lot of things have happened from our end, but it is too early for me to measure their impact.
Okay.
The foreign trade policy and its impact, or the interest subvention, which we announced much later, its impact, or even the export incentives which we give for merchandise exports, their impact. So it's a year where we have performed from our side with an understanding that exports need that additional support, given the fact that globally there is a depression in demand. Many economies are shrinking. Demand is not really picking up from those economies where our traditional exports have happened. And above all, currency volatility have all affected us. And as a result, for me, a year where we have offered a whole lot of things, but we are yet to measure its impact.
Okay, I'll come to the measurable impact in just a bit, but since you started about exports, let me ask you about that, because you, in a press release that you put out a few days ago, you said that there is no reason for panic or alarm as far as India's exports are concerned. You've articulated very comprehensively some of the reasons involved on account of which we're seeing this decline as far as exports are concerned. The global scenario does not look like it's going to change anytime soon. In fact, if anything, there are concerns on the deepening slowdown in countries and economies like China. In that context, is there need for the government to do more? You've talked about the measures that you've already taken, but is there need for the government to do more to try and alleviate the pain that exporters are facing? And yes, a large part of it is on account of what we're seeing as far as oil is concerned, which has impacted our export numbers. But non-oil exports, are we likely to see more measures from you?
That's difficult to say. That is why I started off by saying we are unable to measure the impact of things which we've done last year. If we could measure that, then I can say, right, this isn't enough, I need to do more, considering that the world situation is not going to change, or if anything, it might worsen. But that's not happening, and it will be too early for me to judge on that. But even otherwise, we are sitting with different sectors and talking to them to say, in the short term, what is it that we need to do? Just so that notwithstanding the impact that our policies or incentives are having on them, this is something that which can immediately restore some kind of a, normalcy, as it were.
So what is the feedback that they've given you?
Some sectors are equally as much as the government wondering whether it's too early for us to talk about it. Yes, there is a fall. Yes, they agree it is not the quantum which is falling, it's the value. And also, in the context of a currency volatility, what is it that India can do to help in that situation? That's difficult to even assess.
Do you believe a depreciating rupee is in India's favor and India's advantage? Of course, you cannot control the way that the currency moves, but do you think that that is a reason where, competitively, we're losing out because of the appreciation of the rupee in comparison to our peers?
Given the economic framework that we have, given the international currency linkages that we know of, yes, a strong rupee doesn't help exports. That's apparent. In a different world, where the economic parameters are fixed differently, a strong rupee can make us feel proud and make us feel, oh, well, against many other currencies, India is holding out. Indian rupee is not really falling. But in the given framework, where you need your rupee to, not be so strong in order to help your exports, yes, it is hurting.
It is proving to be a problem and a challenge for you. So before I move away from exports, final question on, in the short term, of course the long-term fix is going to be a different issue, but in the short term, are there any measures that we can expect, or is it too premature at this point in time? Specifically, I ask you this in the context of the budget, which is going to be in February. Can we expect at least the inverted duty structures that continue to plague a lot of these sectors to be addressed? And also a follow-up question, is it likely to get even worse for us, given the fact that we're now seeing these global trade arrangements that are playing out, the TPP being just one of them? Are we going to be squeezed out even further?
Right. Two parts of that question. First thing, you talked about the inverted duty structure, considering that the budget is getting closer and so on. Irrespective of what impact the exports are having because of global depression, inverted duty structure per se is unacceptable. We have to look at it with a certain rationality. And whether it affects the exports, whether it's going to have a positive impact on something else, I would think that that's just not sustainable. For a rational tax structure, you just cannot hold on. So we will be talking to the Finance Ministry, highlighting areas where this is affecting us, and therefore that's a different story altogether, and we'll be working on it. That's one thing. Second, when you're talking about global plurilateral arrangements, as a result of which are we getting squeezed out? I wish all of us have more time to sit and look at the real context in which all this is happening. The TPP, if I were to take as an example of the plurilaterals that we're talking about, is yet to be even ratified in the United States. Their own Congress has not passed it. Many governments which are party to it have not even taken it to their parliaments, to their legislatures. So it's yet to be born. All right, the structure has been explained, all countries have agreed to. So it's too early for us to talk about it, one. And second, the TPP has a lot more on harmonizing standards than immediately benefiting each other from trade and tariff. So for me, it's an agreement where countries have agreed to harmonize their standards to the US prevailing standards.
Right.
So that's a different ball game altogether. That's one thing. And second, for countries like Vietnam, for countries like Japan, all of whom are members, Peru, Mexico, and so on, the time given for their economies to adjust to certain systems which are part of TPP is 20 years, 25 years, and so on. So here's a trade agreement, which is not the same for everybody. It's not yet to be ratified. It is not yet ratified by their own countries. And above all, we are talking about standards here, much more than anything else. So for me to think, oh, it's going to have an impact on my trade immediately, no, that would be pressing the alarm bells.
But in terms of preemptive action from the Indian government to try and work out trade relationships or trade agreements which will give us more access, which will do away with prohibitive non-tariff barriers where we sort of are faced with if you could call those penalties. But for instance, the India-EU FTA talks have been derailed on account of a specific issue linked to pharmaceuticals and to the pharma sector. But are we now moving forward as far as the India-EU FTA is concerned?
That's no longer true. Yes, we had raised our voice, but after German Chancellor's visit to Bengaluru, where the Prime Minister was also with her, we've had enough of assurance given, and we don't have any reason for us to hold on to the objection that we had raised. And already the chief negotiators have agreed to meet in January. They will start the process, and we will be moving forward on India-EU FTA.
So from January the negotiations will restart?
Yes, absolutely.
And we have given up on the concerns that we had as far as the pharma-related issues are concerned, and they have given us that assurance.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. So that story is finished, and the negotiations are starting on the India-EU. India-Canada FTA discussions are commencing. With Australia, we have progressed well into it. We are looking at sooner tying it all up. So with RCEP, interestingly, 7 of them in RCEP are party to the TPP too. So RCEP negotiations are going on, and I guess that's also progressing very well. We'll be able to finish that also sooner.
If I could just ask you for a follow-up on the India-EU FTA, what is the kind of broad timeline that you believe that we could expect the momentum to really pick up and then an eventual agreement? Well, given the back and forth that we've seen on this matter.
By, let us say, 2014, when this government was formed, 12 or 13 rounds of talks had already happened. Now here, now with a sense of urgency, we are moving forward. Even the EU is keen in tying it up faster. So it should, let's say, I don't want to give a timeline because it's 2 parties talking together. So we'd like to finish it at the earliest. But
some of the other concerns related to the auto sector, related to the wine sector, those concerns you believe have also been addressed, and there is forward momentum?
Well, they'll be talked in detail as we are going along with the negotiations. But both the parties, as I understand, are fairly open-minded and therefore wanting to tie it up faster.
Okay. Since we're talking about talking to other governments, let me ask you about our position when it comes to the US. And I ask you this in the context of the latest decision by the US government and the Obama administration to clear that omnibus spending bill, which impacts the Indian IT sector specifically. NASSCOM has been fairly aggressive in saying that this is going to impact the Indian IT industry by $400 million annually. They call this move discriminatory, and they believe that it will mainly impact the Indian IT sector. Are you going to take this up with your counterpart in the US? Have you already taken it up? What can we expect in terms of the Indian response? Because most people that we've spoken to who have been in government previously believe that India must respond and must reciprocate on this.
India's taken it up in a very big way. The last meeting that we had with the US trade representative in the US, I had raised this issue. And we had asked for them to look into it with all seriousness, because this is going to hurt us. And we've also established, the same NASSCOM had come up with a study which I remember releasing it when I went for the Strategic Commercial Dialogue in the Brookings Institute, wherein it was established that Indian IT companies have invested in a very big way in the US, and they are not taking away jobs. There is no Bangaloring in that sense. Jobs are being created in the US, not for Indian citizens. Jobs are being created for the US citizens. And the number of jobs that have been created have all been given in figures out.
And yet this bill has gone through.
That's right. And therefore we highlighted this to say, what are you doing? We are not taking away your jobs. On the contrary, we are coming in, investing and creating jobs. And this is actually giving a certain buoyancy to the US economy. By doing this, you're going to hurt our industry, which is otherwise very willing to work with you. I've raised this with the USTR. At that time, instantly, there wasn't a response given to us. Obviously, they said, all right, we'll have to look at it, and we are not discriminating India. This is applicable to everybody. The usual answers were given to us, but we are following it up. And I'm sure this is not going to be the last that you'll hear. I will be following it up, definitely with the USTR.
You will be taking this up with the USTR?
Yes, it's a matter of serious concern.
It is a matter of serious concern. You will be taking this up with the USTR. Could there be a possibility to, in fact, even take this matter to the WTO settlement body?
Well, that's a bit later, if it's necessary. I hope it won't be necessary to go to the WTO on it.
You raised this matter in the past, yet the bill went through, so do you believe that talk has not really achieved much?
Let's see. I would want to handle it more with the US directly.
How soon do you intend to raise this issue with the US?
It is all Christmas time now, Christmas and New Year. US doesn't seem to be working. Many of them are off. As soon as the New Year comes in, I will do it.
Let me ask you this. Are you disappointed with the fact that despite this bonhomie between the US and India, and we like to call each other strategic partners and natural allies and so on and so forth, there hasn't really been much in terms of reciprocal behavior that we've seen from the US, specifically to do with the IT sector and the IT sector's concerns, totalization. And I know that you raised this issue as well when you were in the US the last time around. Again, there has been no forward movement on the US's part as far as the totalization agreement is concerned, which also impacts the Indian IT sector and slaps them with a bill of about $1 billion annually as well.
Absolutely. And the answer given in that case is that we do not have an insurance and social security policy in India which is comparable with what exists in the US, and therefore they don't think it will be right for them to give away. But nevertheless, it is the Indian workers' money, and that's getting locked up there. And we have raised how unfair it would be for the US to tell us that in your country you do not have a certain law which is comparable with mine. In fact, I did say in India there is a culture of the family, whether it's right or wrong, whether in today's situation, whether you need a social security law or not, I'm not getting into the debate. But I did say this, that in India there has been a culture that the family supports everybody. Elderly are taken care of by the family, unemployed youth are taken care of by the family, children are not driven out of the house at 16 saying you take your job and live your life. The family has been the biggest social security net for every individual. And if I say that this system doesn't prevail in the US, will it work? It won't. Each country has its own way of doing things. And in a smallish way, it has had a big impact. The government has brought in the various Bima Yojanas, which is covering every Indian citizen.
Sure.
So I said, if you want to have a universal coverage of a Bima Yojana, this is what it is. The government has brought it in. So I have raised it from the point of view of the typical situation which prevails in India, which cannot be compared with the US, and therefore asked him to...
But this is a long-standing dispute that we've had with the US. And again, whether it's linked to the hike that we've seen in the visa fee, which has again been a unilateral action taken by the Obama administration, or the lack of follow-through action as far as the totalization agreement is concerned, is it now time for India to talk tough?
If you have not already talked tough?
Well, it doesn't seem to have worked so far.
Well, tougher.
So it is time for India to talk tougher? Reciprocal action, maybe?
Let's see. I would believe that talks can help us, and we'll talk.
Okay. Let me ask you about whether we can expect any further action as far as anti-dumping duties are concerned. We have seen some measures being taken by the government in the light of cheap Chinese imports specifically. Is there cause for greater concern, or do you believe that the measures taken so far have started to act, or do you believe that there is need for more action at this point in time? I know that there are separate consultations on as far as safeguard duties are concerned, but your ministry's remit with dealing with the anti-dumping duties, so can we expect more on that front?
Well, certainly you can expect more on that. My anti-dumping team is also being strengthened. It is a truth that anti-dumping actions are preceded by about 18 months of intensive research, establishing facts, data collection and so on, which is an unduly long period. The injury by that time is caused very badly. So we would want a system whereby we are able to do it faster.
Okay.
And the data collection process also, wherein the industry also will have to help the ministry. So ministry alone cannot collect enough data, enough such data with which we can take decisions. So the industry and us will have to work much more methodically on this.
Okay, so we can expect more measures.
Absolutely.
Any particular
That's a legitimate tool
any
to use.
particular sectors that we're looking at beyond steel at this point in time?
Well, I think tiles had a problem.
Okay.
So these are two I can take readily as examples, but in which we definitely need to work speedily.
Okay.
And these are legitimate ways of establishing that injury is being caused.
Okay, so can expect more measures as far as anti-dumping is concerned. Let me now talk to you about WTO and the Nairobi Pact, which of course has created a fair amount of controversy. You responded to a lot of the criticisms of the Nairobi Pact in Parliament as well. It's a complex issue. It's not an issue that most television viewers, completely understand as well. So I'm going to ask you to respond to the comments that have come in from various experts. I'm not a WTO expert either, so I'll ask you to respond to the comments that have come in from experts who deal with WTO-related matters. The sum and substance of it seems to be that we have come back status quo. We may not have gained anything, or we haven't gained anything. We may have conceded ground in some specific areas. I know that this was a question asked of you in Parliament as well, and you said that we have not given up any ground, and the Nairobi Pact is not detrimental to India's concerns. If I could ask you to clarify for us that specifically as far as the Doha development round is concerned, the fact that there has been a divergence of opinion, does that seem to at this point in time suggest that the development round is over, which means in the long term it's bad news for countries like us?
Like you conditioned your question or the issue, the question itself is layered. So I'll deal with it one after the other. Doha developmental agenda is something where we went, and not just us, the G33 Africa group, LDCs, all of us wanted a reaffirmation of the Doha development framework which exists within the WTO. Not just this Nairobi round, but this has always been a question of, oh, it's dragged for too long, 13 years, 14 years, now 15 years, we're not moving forward, and so on. So it's not a debate which was born in Nairobi.
No.
Reaffirmation is something which these many groups wanted, we also wanted. We made a very strong pitch for it. There was one section which did not want the reaffirmation.
The US.
The US, EU, some of the countries which were following the US, Japan, many others. Now, I could have claimed a victory by saying, we ensured that they didn't get away with it, that we did not allow the US to say, look, no reaffirmation, or we don't want reaffirmation. No. What emerged is a statement of fact. We fought to ensure that the Doha developmental agenda will not be finished. It's a different story that the reaffirmation did not happen. Neither did it get finished in this round. What we ensured was just a statement of fact, wherein some countries wanted it, some countries did not want the reaffirmation, which meant that there was no unanimity.
Right.
And WTO works on unanimity.
Right.
And when there is no unanimity, don't all of us understand that the status quo continues? So the continuity of the status quo is what I want to underline here.
Okay.
And if any, it gives us more time to fight. Okay. If we strongly believe that it is the Doha developmental agenda which we want to have, we can fight for it.
Okay.
That's the first one. Sure.
If I can just interrupt you on this particular issue and raise the point that was raised by the former Finance Secretary, S.P. Shukla, and he said that if there was no consensus, decisions need to be arrived at through specific majorities. Given the lack of agreement between developed and developing countries at Nairobi, India should have exercised this legal right when the talks got extended by a day. Well, if you look at it technically, when there's no unanimity, there's a provision in the WTO that you can put it to vote, put the contentious issue to vote. But how many times in the past, because it's a customary practice that I'm underlining, how many times in the past on any contentious issue, let me ask every secretary who's held the position in the Commerce Ministry or anywhere else, how many times in the past has the WTO gone on the route of putting that contentious issue to vote? No, never. Although technically the provision exists, because it's become a customary and good custom and a good customary practice that unanimity is the best way to arrive. But since there was no unanimity on this issue, and since this is an issue that is so crucial for developing countries and developing economies like India, should we not have exercised that right? I'm trying to understand why we chose not to. We chose not to exercise.
I'll address that. Sure. It would have meant I ask for a voting, or I say, no, you're not agreeing with me, I walk out. Which meant that if I'd walked out, I'm sure there would be one set of NGOs who will be, India's come out like a champion. I'm sorry. You want to be there. You want to make your point. You also want to be sure that whatever happens from now, you will be a part of it, rather than just wreck the institution by saying, I'm the champion of all those poor. I'll have to be standing up here and saying, if you don't agree with me, I walk out. You may walk out. Today, let me tell you, G33, Africa Group, LDCs, all of us have been very clearly saying, please reaffirm.
But they haven't.
They haven't. But the question is this the best way? Is it for me to walk out from the forum, which is the only multilateral forum? Is it for me to walk out? And therefore give more credibility or get isolated in the World Forum? And for the same NGOs who would tell me, what has India done to itself? You've now become the only one in the world.
So you believe the choice was to not push India into a corner, to avoid isolation, which is why you chose not to exercise that legal provision?
Because what was being stated is no decision to completely dismantle Doha. It was no decision to say, if India doesn't agree, it doesn't matter, here are we, rest of us, going ahead. That would have violated the consensus principle. That didn't happen. They only said, look, we'll state that there was one group this way, there was another group that way. That's a matter of fact.
Okay.
Where do I have an objection to that?
Okay. Let me move now to the other issues that have been raised as far as the Nairobi Pact is concerned. And again, this is a criticism of the fact that the declaration recognizes that some members wish to identify and discuss other issues for negotiations. This opens the door for contentious new issues such as investment, government procurement, and global value chains to be brought into the WTO. I know that this was again a matter that you tried to clarify in Parliament, but that seems to be the concern, that because this was part of the declaration, that there is now room for new issues to be added on.
No. If anything, if I remember that statement in the declaration, it said with all the members to agree on it. You've missed out on those few words. Without the agreement of all the members, no new issue can come into the WTO, and that's been reaffirmed. And therefore, this declaration did not say we are bringing in newer issues, whether it's government procurement or anything of that kind. No, they cannot come without all members agreeing to it. That's what is said in that.
Okay.
And what is the wrong in it? Unless all members agree, you're not going to be able to bring in. That's the stated position even now.
Okay.
So we are not worse off with that.
We're not worse off, and it's status quo as far as that issue is concerned. Let me ask you about another comment that's come in from a lot of people who track the WTO, and this one comes in from Biswajit Dhar, and he says that the decision on completely eliminating export subsidies by 2023 will further aggravate the crisis in our sugar sector, and this is something that we should not have agreed to. This was again an issue that was raised by several parliamentarians in the Rajya Sabha when you addressed this issue. Do you believe that as far as our agriculture sector and specifically the sugar sector is concerned, we are worse off today?
Export subsidies even otherwise violate of WTO. You're not giving any export subsidy even now. If anything, under Article 9.4 of the WTO, you're giving transport subsidy or marketing assistance.
Right.
It is only these two which we pretend to claim that we are giving subsidies to. There are ever so many agricultural exports which cannot happen even now because subsidies are being given by the developed countries. You're not at par. There is no level playing field. Now, what this export competition business of Nairobi has done is for them to remove all those subsidies. For them to remove instantly and immediately, which means your exports are going to be competing better now because those subsidies which were being given by these countries can no longer be given, and the few subsidies that you're giving are being given time till 2023 just so that you may withdraw. But what doesn't stop even otherwise is if you were to give a production subsidy for your sugar cane growers, nobody can stop you. So if you tell me that, oh, you export subsidy, where were you giving any? You were only giving transport.
But the production subsidy argument still holds for the US as well, then?
Yes, we can also give it. Nobody stops India from giving production subsidy to your cane farmers or for anybody for that matter. So if you're not going to exercise those options which exist for you legitimately, and you have, because of the differential treatment that is allowed under WTO, obtain time till 2023 to say gradually those transport and other things will have to be withdrawn, not immediately, gradually. And immediately the developed countries would withdraw theirs. Are you in a better position to export with greater competitiveness or not? So I would think you're better off, because they are now not going to be able to give, except for a few countries for a few products, which I did say, swine meat and dairy products and so on. All other subsidies from the developed countries, particularly for your agricultural products, are all going to go away. So your agriculture is much better off to get better price for your agriculture, for the farmers. This is a better deal. And for those subsidies which you're giving in the name of transport or marketing assistance, you have time till 2020.
Okay, my final question on the WTO. Do you, you've explained to us the rationale behind the positions that India took at Nairobi for the Nairobi Declaration. But do you come away from this disappointed with the outcome?
No, I said I'm disappointed only because the unanimity with which Doha could have been reaffirmed didn't happen. But at the same time, we ensured that even with the matter-of-fact position being stated, that unless all those unfinished agenda of Doha development round are completed, or we have to take them on board immediately, that has been added in the declaration, which is a stated position of all the countries, expecting that glorious day when Doha developmental round will, by popular agreement, no longer continue. Now, even in a situation where the division was apparent, we have ensured that policy, that any time Doha is going to be concluding, any unfinished agenda will have to be carried forward, has been made a part of this one. Second, the special and differential treatment which is there as a matter of benefit for developing countries has also been carried forward. The special safeguard mechanism was not even on the agenda. There were not even enough discussions held before the Nairobi ministerial meet. After reaching there, I had asked for it, and in fact there's a lot of media reports saying, oh, you asked for it but you didn't attend the meeting. Simultaneously, many meetings happened. The Commerce Secretary sat in that meeting through and through, the first one. The second one, which ran till 3 in the morning, I sat. First, they indirectly give us the benefit or the credit for having brought the SSM on the agenda. Then they say, oh, you brought it on agenda but you didn't attend the meeting. My Commerce Secretary sit in that meeting. Nobody wants to double check on that. Simultaneously, when so many meetings happen, I go for one, she goes for one, all of us attending to each other's list of things that we have to do so that we can end of the day compare notes and go for the next one. And the next one, which happened the very next day till late night, early morning of 3 o'clock, we sat and worked, and in that I was there. So this media reporting sometimes doesn't get the whole story. I wish they do, I, in fact, spent time briefing religiously every day the set of journalists who had come from India to tell them what is happening. So in spite of that, sometimes I feel, you give the credit, but yet not fully.
Okay. Let me ask you, ma'am, about another sort of big-ticket announcement that's expected from your government, and I know that your ministry is in that sense spearheading the initiatives there. That's the startup policy that's going to be unveiled on the 16th of January by the Prime Minister to tap into this startup culture and ecosystem. What can we truly expect? Because I believe there is still uncertainty on the definition of a startup, on the kind of incentives. I understand that your ministry is in talks with the Finance Ministry, but the Finance Ministry has not necessarily agreed, at least as far as the fiscal incentives possibly are concerned. What can we really expect from the startup policy?
Well, that will be...
I know the Prime Minister's big day, but give us some sense of what to expect.
Well, we are making sure that a lot of work has gone into it. We've consulted a lot of people. A lot of youngsters who are into startups in a very big way, and also who have done it on their own steam till now, have all given us inputs. We have made sure that there is a complete openness from the government. Startups is such an area where government cannot go with a fixed opinion of this is how it should be, not at all. Because startups is by nature something which has been wide, vibrant and varyingly different from each area in which they have started. So, and there's a lot of novelty in it, and there's a lot of, because of the novelty, interest of even people who otherwise wouldn't be there. So we've tried capturing every one of these strands, and the fiscal implication is somewhere the finance ministry is working. In fact,
there is a disagreement then?
No, in the sense, I think they are very open about wanting to do something, wanting to be flexible, and ensuring that every incentive be extended. But of course, finance has its
fiscal constraints. So we shouldn't expect much as far as fiscal incentives are concerned.
No, I won't say that. They are still working at it. I'm sure something will come out of it.
Okay. You know, we're at the start of a new year. What more can we expect specifically as far as FDI-related issues are concerned? I know that there's been significant amount of liberalization or further liberalization across many sectors. But defense, for instance, a lot of fanfare on Make in India and so on and so forth. But actual big-ticket money or small-ticket money, nothing has started to come in as far as the defense sector is concerned.
No, that's not true.
Your own data suggests that.
No, that's not true.
At this point in time.
Well, you have this major agreement with the USSR, I mean with the Russians. Gosh, USSR is long gone. With Russia, manufacturing, which is going to be located between Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra.
Right.
You're going to have it in Indore, Bhopal, and so on.
That's only happened in the Prime Minister's visit a week, not even a week ago. But so far, there's been virtually no FDI that's come in. Is that linked to the fact that there is still no clarity as far as the new procurement policy and the new DIPP is concerned? Because
not true, not true.
Sorry,
let me take the figures.
Yeah.
Let me take the figures. World over, if there is a drop in FDI of 16%, and that's the right figure. World over, a drop of FDI, 16%.
We're up
India
35%, yeah.
38%.
Yeah.
That's not without reason. Those are monies which are coming into areas which have great scope in India. Now, when you're talking about defense, obviously people are, after the policy was announced, looking at various areas into which, within defense, into which they can come in. There's a lot of interest. Now, the Russian example that I took is not a small-time investment. It's a massive investment. A few others are in the pipeline. So I think defense is going to benefit, one, because we have a captive market in India. We ourselves will be a big-time procurer, which is what we're doing now, sending the money outside. If the manufacturing happens in India, you will be the first one to buy it. And anything excess of what you bought is going to be exported from here. And for exports, you don't have to search for market because defense is such a area where market is readily available. So I think it's happening. For all of us to see that it is concretely seen in the ground,
it'll take time.
Sooner.
Okay.
Sooner, not longer.
So what will be the key priorities for you in 2016? What is it that you would like to get done that you haven't been able to address so far?
No, I like to first of all keep the momentum up on the initiative which the Prime Minister started, about which again in February, Make in India is going to have a week-long, marking off the launch of Make in India. And this time it's going to be in Mumbai. The momentum cannot be lost. Ease of doing business came in because of Make in India, the initiative. We had identified 98, now we have identified even more. We are working with the states, and that's actually brought in a certain sense of healthy competition between the states. We'll continue with that. That's my first thing. Second, of course, exports. I think in spite of what is happening globally, because we are focusing on newer markets, whether it is Africa related, whether it's Latin America, whether it's the Nordic countries, or whether because of European Union, where we are still looking at certain high-end exports, there will be a great revival, and I'm very sure exports will soon see better days. So, but we'll be working on that. That's my second. Third, it's also a year in which many of the investment decisions which have been made, like the Japanese investment, the Chinese investment, the Russian which is coming, all of which is getting facilitated through our ministry. There is a Japan Plus.
Right.
We are looking at other countries where we need to quickly get them to identify projects, really do the investment, and have their teams work with us. So we'll be spending time on channelizing those which have been announced. Like when the Prime Minister went to the UAE,
Sure.
there was a very big offer made even there, for which the Crown Prince's visit is awaited. And that's, again, something which we are looking forward to. So these are kind of things on which we will be tying up those commitments which have been made.
And taking up a tougher position with the US.
I think so, yes.
Right.
Right.
Ms. Sitharaman, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. We wish you
you.
the very best of luck for 2016. Thank you very much for comprehensively articulating what your ministry is going to be focusing on and speaking to us on CNBC TV 18. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Shereen.
With that, it is time for us to wrap up the CNBC TV 18 special. From all of us here, goodbye. Many thanks for watching.